Good evening. When the 111th Congress meets in Washington this January, there will be a familiar face missing from the ranks of the members of the House of Representatives. That's the face of Representative Ralph Regula. Mr. Regula opted not to run for re-election this year after 36 years of continuing service representing not only District 16, but Northeast Ohio and the entire state of Ohio. We're here in Mr. Regula's farm, and he joins us to talk about his career and reflect on his life of public service. Mr. Regula, thank you for being with us.
Happy to.
A year ago in October, you announced that you would not be running for re-election. Why?
Oh, I think after 36 years, I had a great experience. I served my time, and I wanted to have some time at home, free time in a sense, and also when I had good health that I could pursue other interests that I have.
Since October of 2007, a lot has happened in this country. We've had the foreclosure crisis, we're in a recession, a lot of economic difficulties. And I know you don't second-guess your decisions, but in light of that and the wisdom we need right now in Washington, do you regret the choice that you made not to run again?
No, I don't regret it at all, because it was the right time for me to retire, and it was just time to move on. And at my age, I wanted some years left that my wife and I could share our home and our family. They're all close by, and my love of the land, which I can do here.
Unless you get called back to Washington in the next week, the last vote you will have ever made had to do with the auto bailout.
That's correct.
And forgive me if I'm being simplistic, but to me it kind of typifies your votes in Congress, because you did not necessarily vote the party line, you voted your conscience. Why did you vote for that bill?
Because I think it's in the best interest of the nation to stabilize that industry. And it's important to Ohio particularly, because we have a lot of suppliers to the auto industry in Ohio. It's important to the jobs in Ohio. Mm-hmm. It's important to our local governments who depend on those industries to support them with their tax revenues. And I think it was just the right vote at that for that time. Now, I think that the Senate made an effort to make some changes which probably were pretty good. Mm-hmm. And I hope maybe that the president will decide to go on his own and using part of the $700 billion to keep this industry going, because it is extremely important to Ohio and the nation.
Well, I want to go from the end of your public service career back to the beginning. And my research indicated that you served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. You used the GI Bill to go to school at Mount Union College. Go Purple Raiders.
Right.
You were a principal, an educator, went to law school at night. How did you get into public service?
Well, after I finished law school and I decided to go out and open a law office, which I did by myself in the village of Navarre. And I guess what really got me started is that the county commissioners asked me to chair a commission or committee to establish a regional planning program for Stark County. Mm-hmm. And the reason was that one of the commissioners had a grandson in my school, so he knew me, and he was a Democrat, and I began to get known as a result of that. And then, of course, I've always enjoyed doing things that help people.
Mm-hmm. You went from the Regional Planning Commission, working on that, to the State Board of Education, the Ohio House, the Ohio Senate, and then you went to Washington.
Correct.
And in Washington, your interests were areas of specialization for you. You were interested in education, you were interested in healthcare in the medical field, research, you were interested in alternative forms of energy, and as you said before, always the land. Well, remind our viewers of some of the things that you have done, some of the projects that you've made happen here in Northeast Ohio, and the kind of funding that you have been able to bring back.
Well, we've been involved in a lot of projects. Some that people are familiar with, of course, is the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. John Seiberling had the vision for it. He asked me to co-sponsor the legislation. I was a freshman at the time, and unfortunately, I was on the committee that funds the national parks, and was at that time, so I was able to direct a lot of funding to get the Cuyahoga Valley moving along. I was also involved in the establishment of NEO-UCOM, the medical school, and the Ohio and Erie Canal Corridor, and a lot of projects. In the medical field, I've pushed hard to support our medical facilities. I have a goal, if you want to call it that, is to make Ohio the medical capital of the United States, and we're moving in that direction. We have great facilities in Ohio. Most people don't fully appreciate this fact, but you have the institutions in Cleveland and Akron, Canton, Massillon, and just recently I was honored by the Children's Hospital in Columbus because they're one of the leaders in research and children's issues, and the goal is to help people. That's what it's all about.
Well, one of the other projects you were very instrumental in, it was a favorite project of yours, if I'm not mistaken, for like 40 years, was the Ohio and Erie National Heritage Canalway.
That's true.
Why is something like that important?
Well, because, first of all, I love to hike. And in my farm here, I've got a couple miles of trails that I've cut through the woods and so on. And the beauty of trails, and this is true of the Ohio and Erie Canal, you bring nature to people. If you go out there on a weekend, there are families on bicycles, and some of them with a wagon, they're pulling the little ones, they're hiking. It's a great family coming together, and they get nature, they get history, they get well-being, because walking is probably the best single exercise you can do. All these things are combined in one place on the Canal Trail, and we've got a lot of other members gotten interested in establishing trails of one form or another. For example, the C&O Canal, which went from Washington to Cumberland, Maryland, you can hike the whole thing, and I've hiked most of it myself. It's 160 miles.
What's it like when you're out on the Canalway or on one of the trails and somebody recognizes you? How does it make you feel?
Well, I'm pleased that people enjoy it. I still remember in my mind's eye, one day I was there in Canal Fulton at Lock 4, and here comes a lady who had to be in her 70s or 80s, just chugging along, and about 30 minutes later, here comes a little girl who was probably about 6, chugging along, and they weren't with each other, but it illustrated the value of this to all ages.
Yeah. There are those who have questioned how in the world did Canton, Ohio ever get the National First Lady's library. Explain how that came to be. It's anonymous to me to Cleveland getting the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, it is a tremendous asset, and it's a story that needed to be told, and my wife deserves the credit for that. She was going to do a Lincoln Day speech for me one night, and that's been maybe 14 years ago. And I said, Mary, you'll have to do it. I can't make it tonight. She said, I will, but I want to talk about Mary Todd Lincoln, because she had an interest in First Ladies, and she started doing research and realized that there wasn't a lot of information about First Ladies in the library. And she said, this is an oversight that I think ought to be corrected. Well, in the meantime, the old McKinley home was available, and we persuaded the Park Service to acquire it. And she started there with the one room of some First Ladies historical information, and then it's a great story how she did this. She raised probably $10 million over a period of time, and a public-spirited man in Canton offered her the bank building, and she made that into a research center and a library, along with the McKinley home. and it's just growing and growing. A huge interest in it, and today it's part of the National Park Service. As a matter of fact, it's called the First Lady's National Historic Site, and it's the only thing like it in the United States. And they get people coming from. I was in there not long ago, and there was a group from China.
And it's right here in Canton.
It's right here in Canton, Ohio, and it's really caught on. But she deserves the credit. She's been a full-time volunteer. She's done all this with absolutely no compensation. In fact, we both put quite a bit of money in it. But that's great because it tells a story that's so important for people to know, and it's an inspiration to young women. They get a lot of school groups that come there, and she particularly likes the young girls to realize that women can make a world of difference, and so it's worked out pretty well.
How hard is it to be a congressman? I look at like your committee assignment on the House Appropriations Committee and the kind of money that is available in terms of billions of dollars. How do you scrutinize that kind of funding and decide who gets what?
Well, you sort it out, and I had a Cracker Jack's staff, and I relied on them for research and advice, and other people, other members, worked with my colleagues. And you decide what best serves people, because what government does is it takes resources in the form of taxes and makes policy decisions that affect people's lives. And I mentioned particularly health. We funded the National Institutes of Health. They're the world's premier research institution on health issues. And it makes you feel good to know that you're going to help people.
But how do you balance what might be good for your district in the one sense, or your state in the one sense, and what would be better for the country?
I think that what's good for your district and your state is good for the country, and what's good for the country is good for your district and state, because it's people. What you really need to do is what's good for people, not region or what part of the country. What's good for people generally. Base your decision on what impacts in the most effectively on behalf of the greatest number of people.
How has politics changed in 36 years?
Oh.
And politicians, because I think you are a model politician. Everyone I've spoken with has said that your like may never be seen again. So.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there have been good people throughout the history of this nation, and there will be good people after we're gone. That's what makes the United States and what makes any nation good for those that live there is the kind of leadership they get. Now, I think politics have changed a little bit in that people are more intimately involved because of television. I mean, everything, I can vote in 3 seconds, somebody back home knows how I voted. I've had calls 4 or 5 minutes after a vote and say, why'd you vote this way? Or I'm glad you did, one of both kinds. And the other thing that's changed is the impact of money. Okay. I ran my first campaign on maybe $100,000, and now we're into millions of dollars for congressional campaigns, which of course absorbs the time of members raising funding to run for office. And it affects even the appointments and committee assignments. And that part of it I find is a little not a very positive matter.
My next question may sound a little bit naive to you, but so much of politics is bipartisan, is partisan, not bipartisan, partisan, and you know, that to me, I don't understand why people cannot just get along.
I don't either, frankly.
Oh, okay.
And I think in my career, I've been able to work with people from both sides. Just as John Seiberling and I worked together on the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, on the Neo-Yukon was Bob Stockdale, with state legislator, the state senator. Bob Stockdale and Oliver O'Kasich and myself sponsored the original legislation to create a medical school in northern Ohio. In my time in Congress, I've been pretty bipartisan, to tell you the truth. I'm always saying what works. My chairman on Interior was a liberal, wonderful guy from Chicago, high-rise, farm boy from Ohio. Was totally antithesis to him, but we got along. I loved the guy, and we worked together.
For 36 years, you spent the week in Washington, and then, if I read correctly, you came home every weekend to your farm.
That's right.
Is that?
I might have missed a few, but not very many.
Well, is that maybe the reason for the longevity you had, because you were able to come back and stay in touch with the common man?
I think that's part of it. We get to a lot of meetings, kept in touch with the people. I've never had an unlisted telephone. The phone that's hanging out there in the walls, in the book, and so people could reach me. And that's, I always say my title is not congressman. My title is representative to the Congress. Now that implies a lot, and I take that seriously.
Well, part of that taking it seriously would be, if I'm not mistaken, your record of votes.
Yeah,
you have a record of voting on 99.5% of the bills that came before you?
Well, that's true. I didn't miss many votes.
I'm curious about the 0.5% that you may have missed, but that's an unbelievable record.
Well, once in a great while, you'd have a commitment back in the district that you had to stay for that, and once in a while, I maybe we have a bell system that alerts you when there's a vote, and maybe I didn't happen to hear the bells for one reason or another, but I made a sustained effort to be there for votes.
Looking back on your 36 years, what would you consider to be some of your greatest accomplishments?
Oh, gosh, it's hard to pick. It's like saying which of your children do you love the most. We've been involved in so many different things. I'm Neo-UCOM, which we started when I was in the state senate, and I've provided funding for that. And we most recently got a pharmacy school for them. In terms of impact on people, all this health care facilities, education, we've done quite a bit to help colleges in the area, because at one point I was chairman of the committee that funded the United States Department of Education. I don't think I could pick out any one thing. My mission has been to do what's good for people.
Also, looking back, is there anything you were not able to accomplish that you wish you had been able to?
Oh, there's the more you could do in education. Mm-hmm. I'm a great believer that the future of this nation is dependent on a quality education for every child. And one of the things that really troubles me is the high incidence of dropouts. The national average is about 30%. Now that means that 30% of our young people are not getting a high school diploma. And it really, if I could wave a magic wand, that's something I would really try to reduce substantially, because each one of those dropouts limits their opportunity in our society, and they become problems for themselves as well as society. Now, many of them will pick up, they get GEDs, which is the equivalent, and I go to the programs at Kent State where they have a little graduation ceremony for, I remember one 25-year-old woman with 3 children, single mother, and she was getting her GED and was going on into the nursing school. And I said, that's wonderful, because not only will you be better off, but your 3 children will have a role model in you. So I guess that's the one thing I'd like to change or improve for the nation.
You have served under 7 presidents. Any one of those particular presidents stand out in your mind that...
Yeah, all of them different. I was pretty friendly with most of them. Jimmy Carter and I never got really close, but Rosalind came out to dedicate the McKinley home for my wife, and she said, "Well, would you help me get the Carter Farm in the national park as a historic site?" Because I was chairman of the committee with the checkbook for the Park Service at the time. I said, "I'll do that," and I did. And then later on, she called me and said to come down and be the dedication speaker. Now, I never got close to Jimmy, but I did to Rosalind, and I liked her a lot. And Ronald Reagan and I had a thing going about building fence out of telephone poles. When you go out the driveway here, take a look at that fence where our horses are. Well, they're not in there now, but you take telephone poles and notch them like Lincoln logs, and it's you got to have equipment. They're heavy, but Ronald Reagan told me about this, and my son and I were down. My son Richard wanted to meet the president, and he said, "Dad and I could have used you yesterday. We were building fence." He read about it, and Reagan launches into this description about building fence out of telephone poles, and then he sent me pictures, and I have a picture of him building fence on the ranch. But I got the poles together because the phone companies are going underground, and I wrote him a note, and I got a handwritten. He was in the White House. It was on the White House stationery. "Dear Ralph, and he described in detail how to build this fence, cut so much off the bottom of the post, etc. And he had a little description. Well, I mean, that's remarkable. And then later on, I visited him when he was in California after he left, and he still was mentally alert, and he wanted me to go up to his ranch and see his fence, which I did. And it was very interesting for me. He had a 600-acre ranch. So we shared a common love of the land. He cut trails, as did I, here, and his ranch was what he loved, just as I do my farm. But each one of them had their own personality.
What's the best part about being a congressional representative?
The best part, and people say, "What do you miss the most?" I said, what I will miss is the ability to help people, and to bring projects and bring things for the district. Just today, for example, I had a call from a lady who had a problem and wanted my help, and I said, "Well, I'm sorry I can't help him, but here's the number of my successor, and you just have to wait till January and call him."
What's the worst part about being a representative?
Being time away from home and from your family. I'd say, I missed my home, but I commuted, so I was here every weekend, and I have to say it's been a wonderful career for me. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed making things happen in this that are beneficial to people. These projects that I talk about, I had the president of one of the universities told me the other day, "You got us a grant for a science lab, and we went out and raised. You got $1 million, and we raised 4 more. We built a science building, and it's really one of the jewels of our campus." Well, that makes you feel good.
Sure. There are 2 projects that are very close to your heart that you have entrusted to Tim Ryan and to Betty Sutton.
Right.
Explain both of those, if you will,
Well,
please.
the Alaskans are determined to rename Mount McKinley as Mount Denali. Right. And so under the Board of Geographic Names, anytime there's a piece of legislation pending, they won't touch it. And they're the ones that make the decision. So I've been introducing every year at the beginning of each session a bill to name Mount McKinley, make it a permanent in the law name. And, of course, I've given Tim Ryan that portfolio because he has Niles, which was the home of McKinley. And then I told Betty Sutton, she's in the middle of the Cuyahoga Valley, so I said, "The park will be your baby now," because I've been the patron of the Cuyahoga Valley for many years.
Mr. Regula, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
I'm going to spend time here in the farm, obviously. I think I hope to get in the classrooms and say to young people, particularly those that are interested in government. I find I go in the past to a lot of schools and colleges, and I find young people are a lot of idealism and a lot of interest in politics. And what I want to say to them, get yourself equipped with some knowledge about budget and tax policy and environmental policy, educational policy, and so on, so you can be a good staff person. I said there's going to be a lot of opportunity in Columbus, in the county courthouse, in Washington, for people who are equipped with knowledge to be staff people, because in the final analysis, here we have the president-elect appointing people, and every day he brings out some new people. The success of his or failure of his administration, he'll determine it to some extent, but the people he names as cabinet officers, I think I read the other day where a president names about 4,000 people totally that are part of the administration. Whether he succeeds or fails will be shaped by those people. And what I want to say to young people is, get yourself equipped to be a good staff person. If you want to change the world, that's the place to do it. Because staff people really do make government, whether it's Columbus or Washington or the county government, they really make it work. And I want to reach out to them.
Mr. Regula, thank you so much for joining us. You have changed our world immeasurably and far to the better. So we appreciate it very much, and we want to wish you and your family a very happy New Year.
Oh, thank you.
And we want to wish our viewers a very happy New Year. Next week at this time, Eric will be in the NewsNight chair. He'll wrap up all of the stories, the major stories of 2008. January 9th, NewsNight Akron panelists return, and we will be discussing the Citizen of the Year. It'll be some lively debate, and I can tell you right now, Ed and I both disagree vehemently about each other's choice. And I also want you to remember that the New Year is coming up, and Wednesday is New Year's Eve, and nobody does New Year's the way Akron does. First Night Akron is in its 13th year. Go downtown Akron for a family-friendly, alcohol-free celebration of the arts. It's a community event, and all it costs is for admission price is a $10 first night button. There's 18 different venues, metro buses to take you around if the weather is bad, 100 different performers. There's games, fun, food, all kinds of projects. It's a wonderful way to enjoy New Year's Eve. At 11:30, there's a countdown to the new year and a fabulous fireworks display. If you need more information, go to www.firstnightakron.org. Thank you for being with us, and from Western Reserve PBS and all of the NewsNight team, Happy New Year.